We post a selfie thinking our face will always belong to us. But somewhere along the way, it slipped from our grasp. We'll now live in a time where our face is no longer the mark of identity it once was. Instead, it's become a shareable, editable, and monetized commodity. We have surrendered to a world in which it's entirely possible to encounter your own face floating online, separate from you. The most personal of traits, your likeness stripped away and reappropriated, leaving us to confront a once unchallenged assumption. Who owns my face? And sure, this seems like mostly a problem for celebrities, but soon that could easily be any of us. As technology advances and every shred of data gets squeezed for cash, it could very well be us. Sometime in the near and distant future, in the auction that sells every scrap of our identity, it will be the face that commands the highest price. Because the fact is that we can delete every last fingerprint of our digital selves from the internet, but we cannot and we will not escape the face. Our face. For me, the purest form of dystopia is not being kidnapped by aliens or tortured by robots. It's being served an ad by me, a smiling version of myself promoting something I don't even know about. Myself but not me, an algorithmic doppelganger unidentifiably identical to me. It's a strange and almost subtle horror because, unlike, say, an invasion, this is a tragedy of our own making. It's a nightmare we ourselves weave daily through cute hashtagged selfies and pouty duck faces, with each swipe and double tap, through a billion like buttons, through the obsessive worship of our own face. But then again, is it entirely our fault? Because it's mighty easy to scoff and just declare how bad of an idea it is to do this and that, but it's entirely another thing to practice so. And while we can indeed opt out of many a service, while we can cling to our privacy and refuse to engage, what about the ones where we can't? What about the many conveniences and pleasures we would have to give up on in order to live a more private, less marketed life? Because we can delete Instagram, deciding to never feed it another crumb, and a second later unlock our phone with our face. We can deactivate Facebook and yet get profiled for credit cards and loans based on what we liked years ago. It's not one thing, it's not a couple and not 1,000, but a never-ending web of connections and links, a sprawling ecosystem where the only constant is a single thread: data. And there is no data as dangerously delicious as our face. It's the devil's gift. When you think about it, convenience really is the mother of all innovation now. It's all about how easily and smoothly we, the consumers, get to consume. From physical stores converting to websites, from walking down the block to get your groceries to having them delivered to your doorstep, from having to fill our forms to simply tapping on this tiny pad. We are the gaping maw at the end of a conveyor belt of efficiency, always hungry for more. And are we to blame? Are we in the wrong for nodding along at the next shiny piece of tech that will somehow make our life just that bit easier, that bit better, and in doing so will make it just a bit more mindless? So today, everything we do, anything, we leave just a small fragment of ourselves behind, a microscopic shard of our identity, functionally inert by itself, but something that can be pushed and pulled and yarned into a vast interconnected fabric. A tapestry that tells our story better than any words ever could. And all this without ever asking for our consent. Because, of course, we mostly lost all ownership of our own selves the instant the little credit card machine beeped. It's scary. It's scary because leaving an invisible trail of breadcrumbs, each one a little morsel of data, is a great way to become the perfect little consumer. It's the best way to learn our preferences, to tailor the services we use until those annoying pop-up ads turn from somewhat targeted to pinpoint accurate. So what are we to do? Because right now, we cannot in any way change our way of life drastically enough to have any meaningful impact. Right now, every single one of us could delete every social media app, chuck away our smartphones and live off-grid, and nothing will change. Because no matter what, the first time we shared an address, we shared our touch, our face, we lost all and every semblance of control. It's a done deal. When everything about you can be stored, copied and replayed, it's hard to believe in the original. Every image becomes an audition for the next one. You start performing even when you're alone, adjusting your expression for invisible watchers that might not even exist. There is a quiet grief in that, not dramatic, just the slow erosion of trust between us and our own bodies. Think about it for a minute and you realize that the vast majority of social media hinges on this idea of self-performance. Because the more we share of ourselves, the more we feed the churning beast, the more it wants. It's an endless cycle of never being good enough. And so, slowly, we carve out a hollow shell of a persona, a perfectly curated, idealized reflection. Every post further distances the real us from the one we share, until one day we click post and just dissociate. Until one day we stop loving and living the body we have and yearn for the photoshopped, airbrushed version of ourselves until we see our own face in the mirror and cringe. And the face, once the messenger of the soul, becomes customer service for the self. Polite, curated, replaceable. Why do we do this to ourselves, even knowing how bad it is? Why do we willingly surrender every aspect of ourselves, bit by bit, to the greedy gaze of a machine? Why, if not for the fleeting dopamine rush of a few likes, or the empty comfort of a digital high five, would we give away the single most defining feature of ourselves, our face? Because simply put, it's a sad, dark fact that our sense of self, of value, is defined and measured by what we can produce. And the moment we can no longer perform, we fade. And once the claws sink in, once we are hooked to the roller coaster ride of approval and attention, losing it feels worse than losing a limb. It manifests itself not just in depression and self-hate, but in a crippling sort of desperation. No one can survive, and so we go beyond. In an attempt to seduce the fickle god of likes and hearts, we cross the final lines. We further self-cannibalize, cutting and chopping and bloating until the person that once was is dead. Until what's left is a husk, a botoxed, over-edited, cartoonish caricature, something entirely alien. And you know what's worse? That we do all this and it still might not work. Or even more tragically, it might. Because when we get lucky and become the right kind of pretty and find that warmth again, we self perpetuate the same cycle. If anything, those claws sink in even deeper. Like a junkie hooked on truly the worst kind of drug, we keep going, we keep slicing our bits and pieces of ourselves until the day that there is nothing left to do but scream and claw. This is perhaps the most frightening part, how insidious, how silent. There will come a time when we no longer need to post at all, when every last trace of us is collected, sorted, indexed. When the god machines, unfeeling and mechanical, will know every facet of who, why, and what we are. And maybe that's the saddest kind of mercy. To stop being surprised, to stop impulsivity and spontaneity, and instead be the thing we were always destined to be, a series of predictable, calculable outputs. To turn from a human into something else, to turn into the perfect customer. But then again, maybe that is the future that will await all of us. One where our faces are no longer the foundation of our identity, but rather the crown jewel, the ultimate product. Because this isn't a faraway nightmare, it's the final stop on the train we are all strapped to. A train we, sooty fingered and sweating, keep feeding with every smile, every like, every post. A train that pretends to be a friend, and maybe in its own demented way is, but one that's still sucking us dry. The point isn't to sever every link and vanish from the web, but to stop mindlessly shoveling coal, to wake up while there is still a little bit of track left. If we can learn what's worth feeding and what's not, maybe we won't stop the train, but we can at least stop pretending we don't hear it coming. If you did enjoy this video, please consider liking and thank you for watching.